Hello and welcome to the FSF podcast. I am Tim. I am your host, and this is the show made by nerds in a nerdatorium. So welcome to the show. Our guest today, by the way, is actually pretty cool, and I'm very excited that she's here because she's an editor, she's a writer, a podcaster, she's done some producing work, and she's a pretty big fan of. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. There was this show called Star Trek. Some people watched it every now and then. Anyway, she really likes that, and she's a big fan of the Gilmore Girls. So we're going to talk to her a little bit today about both of them. So I am very excited to welcome Laurie Ulster to the show. Welcome to the show, Laurie.
Hi, thank you.
Yes. So, yeah, we've had a little bit of fun trying to actually make this interview work because Laurie's had some scheduling issues. I've had some scheduling issues. And yeah, so today we stuck the landing. We're here. We're doing it. All right. So, Laurie, one of the biggest things that we always like to do on our show is because I like to know what makes people tick. I like to know why you do what you do. What is it? What is your origin story? Because we're nerds. Nerds love origin stories, and we like to find out why our heroes are the way they are. So you are the hero of this story today, Laurie. So what is your origin story? How did you get to where you are now?
I mean, first I have to figure out where I am now to know how I got here. I'm not sure where I am now.
Is it the now or is it the now?
It's, like where I am. I don't know. I think I'm constantly evolving. So
Fair enough.
I can speak to how I get interested in certain things, but such a big question. How did you get to where you are now? I could give you the answer that my son, when he was about 3, gave someone, where he said, well, first I was in my mommy's belly and then I came here.
Factually, he's not wrong. It's a very solid answer.
Yeah, he skipped a couple things, but I thought that pretty much covered it.
We got the gist of it. Yeah. So yeah, if you have a Cliff Notes version of your story of how you got interested in Star Trek and how you got into being a writer, producer, and all that kind of stuff, that'd be great.
All right. Well, so I got into Star Trek because my mom was watching it, and I thought it was the coolest thing ever. And then eventually, and I was very interested in TV because of that. Between Star Trek and the Mary Tyler Moore Show, I think I was pretty determined to do something in TV. I was reading the making of Star Trek and going, you can work on TV shows. It's like a job you could get. So I eventually found myself leaving Toronto to come live in New York. I became a TV producer for a while. I worked at MTV and a lot of places like that.
Okay.
And I'm also a writer because I've been a writer since I was a kid. And then sort of later in my life, I started realizing that maybe loving Star Trek wasn't as embarrassing as I'd always been led to believe. So then I started letting my nerd flag fly. Awesome. And that's when I found all these amazing Star Trek communities that are out there of wonderful, amazing, smart, funny, terrific human beings. And I love TV, so I love writing about TV. I used to work in TV. Once I had kids, I sort of shifted that. Although now they're teenagers and they'd be like, go, we don't care. And so I always try and write about TV, and I write about, I'm a Trek movie where I interview Star Trek people and write about it. I've written some TV related books. I write articles. I write about parenting also. And I'm a copy editor, and I work on Trek Talks and all kinds of stuff.
Absolutely. Okay, so very cool. So I have a question for you based on your list of places that you worked and things that you've done. So, were you at MTV before the rise or the fall of music videos?
Yes. Or I was at MTV in the 90s, basically early 90s.
Oh, awesome. When they actually played music. Nice.
Yes, they played music and had music shows. I worked on game shows. I worked in development. Okay. I worked at MTV2 doing VJ segments, which my kids are like, what's a VJ? I worked at VH1. I did a little Comedy Central, Fuse. So yeah, A&E. Awesome. I was at A&E for a while doing digital stuff.
Okay, that's very cool. Yeah, anytime because I've talked to a couple other people who have worked at some of the music channels, and when I hear that somebody's worked at MTV, I always try to gauge where they were at in the stream of things. Not that it makes their experience any less to me, but I'm always just kind of curious because there's that line of demarcation where MTV was just we're just not going to be music television anymore. We're going to be 16 and pregnant television now.
Right, well, because no one was watching the music stuff anymore. I mean, to be fair, they just weren't getting the audience. I wasn't there in the crazy fun heyday of the '80s, but I got
Mhm.
there in the pretty early '90s.
Yeah, because I graduated high school in '95,
Oh,
and so I was watching, up into the early 2000s when I was started working and going out, and I mean I was working before then, but I was married, and I got married, and I had a son, and so the early 2000s I was busy, and so I wasn't watching MTV as much as I used to, but I remember the top 10 and the TRLs and all that fun stuff, and yeah, so I always kind of gauge that when I hear somebody say, "Yeah, I used to work at MTV." Oh, when?
yeah.
Were you the part of my history that I remember, or
Well, this always makes me sound old because I am, but I worked on the very first MTV Movie Awards.
Oh, really?
Yes.
That's very cool.
Yeah, it was fun. It was a good gig, but it was, I remember I was there doing something, and at some point somebody called me because they said, "We're doing the anniversary." Was it the 20th anniversary of the, and I was like, "Oh God, I can't even think about it." So
I still think though that the Moon Man's one of the cooler awards out there, honestly.
sure.
Yeah,
I
I've always thought so.
I had one great job at the VMAs once, the Video Music Awards, because I didn't really work on them, but I had the easiest, greatest job ever, which was when I was at MTV2. I sat in a little balcony just off to one side of the stage so I could see everything going on the stage. And I had a little webcam that I would point at people in the audience, celebrities in the audience.
Yeah.
So it was a very low stress, enjoy yourself, uh, sneak peek at people who
Oh,
didn't
how cool is that?
some kind of, yeah, it was fun.
Yeah, I bet. I can imagine. All right. So, one of the other things you talked about being a writer since you were really little. Now, one of the books that you just released was about the Gilmore Girls.
Yeah.
And my daughter, I'm like, yeah, I'm talking to this lady who she wrote about the Gilmore Girls, and instantly her ears went up. Oh. So the book is called Gilmore Girls Life Lessons. So what was your inspiration behind wanting to write for the Gilmore Girls, and what can our readers look for, our listeners look forward to when reading your book?
Well, this was a work for hire. So basically, the publisher said to me, "Oh, we're trying to do a book about life lessons from Gilmore Girls." And I was
Okay.
like, "Well, that is my sweet spot exactly, which is pop culture and the lessons you can take from it." Because that's how I live my life is I watch
Sure.
TV and then I figure things out based on stuff I saw on TV. So and
Fair.
I love when it came up, I was in the middle of yet another binge of that show. Like I can just
Okay.
endlessly watch it. So they had a basic outline, but I got to go in and make a whole bunch of suggestions for changing the outline, for adding some stuff to the format. So, like, one of the things I said was the show's so famous for its dialogue. So every section should start with a quote.
Agreed.
And then I also thought that it would be fun to have a what would Kirk do section, and then you don't do whatever it is that Kirk would do. So but I have to say
I,
they did a
nice.
beautiful job on the layout of this book. Like it's a quick, easy, breeze through it kind of read that's just sort of life advice categorized and based on things that Gilmore Girls characters did or should have done or didn't do.
Okay. Yeah, my a little, well, boy, it's actually been longer than I thought it was. Holy crow. I'm going through my memory of older episodes, and we did an interview with Julie Dolan, who had been on the show, not only our show, but she was in Gilmore Girls as well. And I think she was in there for like 4 or 5 episodes. And my daughter was like, "Oh, so who was she and what was she doing?" And I'm like, "Honey, Dad really hasn't watched the Gilmore Girls all that much." To be fair, I wanted Julie Dolan on the show because on Star Wars Rebels, she was the voice of Princess Leia.
Ah.
And I was like, "Oh, well, I got to talk to." And so my daughter was like, "Well, show me her picture." And she's like, "Oh my God, I know who that is." Because she was watching it and she had just seen one of the episodes that Julie was in. So, yeah.
Who was
Um,
Julie on Gilmore Girls?
well, that's a
Did you
very
find
good
out?
question.
Because I don't know the name offhand.
Hold on. This is where Google and quick thumbs come in to help. Let's see. She was Anna in Gilmore Girls.
Anna? Just Anna?
Yeah. Yeah. Hold on. I'm getting there. Good old IMDb to the rescue.
Anna, does it say what?
She was in one of her episodes was called Tippecanoe and Taylor 2.
Okay.
And hold on, that's just the one episode. Good old IMDb. It's helpful in many ways. Yeah, I think it's just Anna. I think that's
Okay.
I don't think that she was assigned a last name. Based on what I am seeing. Yeah, in the listing it's just Gilmore Girls Anna.
All right. Well,
So,
I'll go find her later.
but
'Cause
yeah,
now
so we had talked to, and my daughter was at an age at that point when, because we did this about 2 or 3 years ago. Her and her mom were struggling with a few things in their relationship, and I honestly think that the show kind of helped her, with seeing that, maybe moms aren't all that bad, and moms are
Oh, that's
trying to
nice.
help, and and so I think that was, I like to give the show a little bit of credit for that, because she was watching it so profusely. And it was one of those things where I think she watched it a couple times back to back, just straight through. Because my daughter has a chronic illness, and so she wasn't getting out of the house much at that time. Plus, we were
Right.
going through COVID and everything else, and so she was binge watching that and My Hero Academia like insane amounts. And I can't remember the name of the other anime she was watching, but it was about volleyball. That's I can remember. Starts with an H, but so for any anime fans out there, you probably already know which one I'm talking about and are screaming at the monitor right now. So anyway, but yeah, so that's my level of attachment to Gilmore Girls. Is I just remember that I thought it had pretty nice life lessons for relationships between parent and child, between the daughter and her friends, and some things like along those lines. So I thought that was, I think the daughter's name was Rory, wasn't it?
Rory. Yep.
Yeah.
Because her name
Nailed
was
it.
Lorelai. Lorelai named her daughter Lorelai. And then
Okay.
she goes by the nickname Rory, or the, shortened version. There are actually quite a few writer crossovers from Star Trek to Gilmore Girls.
Oh, really?
And their Star Trek jokes get dropped a lot in Gilmore Girls because they make fun of it.
Fair.
But they are familiar. When someone makes fun of something in a way that shows you they're familiar with it, it's that kind of thing.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
That's cool. I just remember watching the show and watching, a couple people, some of the actors come on screen, like Jared Padalecki was on it, and I'm going to screw up this name. I never can pronounce it correctly. Milo
Ventimiglia.
That fellow. Yeah. Milo. That's how I should have said. Excuse me. But yeah, Milo. Because I remembered him from Heroes and and some few other things. But
they were great on Gilmore Girls. And John Billingsley, our dear John Billingsley, was in an episode of Gilmore Girls.
I did not know that.
He was in either the first or second one, and then he told me that he was mad because they brought in a different teacher to have an affair with Lorelai.
That is a very John comment. I love it.
He's like, yeah, they swapped me out for some other guy.
It's a very John comment. That's fantastic.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. Which reminds me, I gotta reach out to John. We're gonna try and get him on here on one of our live shows before Trek Talks 4 in January.
Yes, which we are deep into. I'm on the Trek Talks team, so we are deep into the planning of it.
Yeah. So because we're thrilled to be, we were asked to be ambassadors for the show this year, and I'm ecstatic about that. And whatever we can do to help, we're all hands on deck. We want to try and help out as much as possible. So we're trying to promote Trek Talks 4 as much as possible. By the way, if you're listening to this, because this will be out well before Trek Talks 4, plan on January 18th, 2025. You can check out Trek Talks 4. It'll be on YouTube. You can find them on Blue Sky. You can find Trek Talks on Threads. And by golly, give them a follow, because they're doing some really good work with the Hollywood Food Coalition. And it's a wonderful thing. So
it's a great cause, and it's the a lot of causes you donate money and you're not always sure where that money's going. This money, like, not a dollar gets wasted, and it all goes
Hmm.
into the very direct thing of food for hungry people.
Yeah,
So,
it's
yep,
fantastic.
and we have
I,
a lot of fun panels planned.
excellent. Okay, a kitty made its way to screen. What's
Yeah,
kitty's
now
name?
there's cat butt, everybody, sorry.
Well, it's kind of what cats do. This is my butt. Look at my butthole.
Look at my butt.
Yeah, pretty much. So what's kitty's name?
This is Spot,
Hello, Spot.
and Spot's friend Snowball is causing trouble somewhere else. Oh, it's
Excellent.
come here, crazy. Oh.
Yeah, no, not so much. But okay. Whenever we talk to somebody and one of their pets makes an on-screen appearance, or in the case of some dogs, an off-screen appearance,
Right.
uh, there's always a question of, because we're big pet lovers, and I've got 2 dogs and a cat, and so I'm always like, hey, tell me about your pets, so. But all right, well, excellent. So we're talking about Trek. We mentioned Trek Talks and how important it is, and we were thrilled last year to not only get John on the show a couple times, but also to get Bonnie Gordon on the show. And John and Bonnie will be hosting that, and again this year. And they did a fantastic job last year. Really enjoyed Trek Talks 3. It was a lot of fun to be able to watch, and the panels were great. And looking like you guys are going to have some really fantastic panels again this year. So. Speaking of all things Star Trek related,
Sure.
obviously you're a Trek fan. You talked about how your mom watched it and that kind of got you into it. But I asked this question of both Star Trek fans or really anybody who's deeply tied to any fandom, because again, this goes back to me wanting to know what makes you tick and why you like the things you like. Because I always think that especially in today's age of, especially with as being a Star Wars fan. There's the fandom menace out there that's always trying to cripple somebody's enjoyment.
Yes.
So I
Don't you love
want
those people?
no, I don't. I
They're like,
want
"You
people
like
to.
something? I'm gonna tell you why it's bad, and you should not
Oh,
like it."
it's horrible. Let people enjoy their things. Let people love what they love. It's not that hard of a. It's
It's
really not
not
that
that
hard of a
hard.
concept. It
My
really
husband
isn't.
doesn't normally do this, but somehow he got in a mood and came storming into my office one day last week to tell me why he hates a Rolling Stones song that I like. And I was like, "Dude, go complain about it to somebody else."
Okay, see now the only person I would or musical group I would do that about. And for those who know me, they're probably answering this already. It's Elvis Presley. I can't stand Elvis. I despise him with every
Oh, would
fiber of
you
my
go
being.
up to somebody who likes him and say, "I hate Jailhouse Rock"?
Just my mom, but
Family
but that's a
members are different.
but that's a whole different. She punished me with Elvis when I was growing up, so I think it's fair. Turnabout's fair play. So I'm just bringing it back there.
Sure.
But yeah, that's the only person I would really do that to. But all right, so but when it comes to Trek, what was it about Trek that drew you to it, other than your mom watching it? There had to be something that interested you and has kept your attention for all these years.
Yeah, so I grew up watching the original series because that's
Mhm.
all there was when I was a wee thing. There weren't even any movies,
When you were a wee lass.
when I was a wee lass when I started, little Canadian girl. So I mean, I loved the stories because they were so mind expanding for me and they
Right.
got me interested in sci-fi. And I loved the characters, and I loved most of all the idea that in the future, humans will not be petty jerks, and we will value each other and will value being smart versus, I was in elementary school, so versus being athletic or being popular.
Mhm.
Um, so it was like fantastic ideas, really memorable characters, and a morality and an optimism, or rather, I would say an idealism that
Mhm.
I appreciated and needed. And then 90s Trek came along and that was all still there. There it was. So that's what I love about it. And I love the way they were able to tell all kinds of stories that make you think about the human condition
Sure.
from a completely different approach, from a way that you're not used to thinking about it.
That's awesome. Yeah, so for me, I grew up and if you go back and you listen to even early versions of this show from 4 years ago, you'll hear me mocking Star Trek, like openly mocking Star Trek. I've had a big turnaround in my life, and the thing is that so growing up, I didn't like the original series. More importantly, I didn't like Captain Kirk. I didn't like TV Kirk. I like movie Kirk.
I love TV Kirk.
I just something about him I just didn't like. I had a very hard time with him. But I always liked movie Kirk, and to me, those are two very different characters. I mean, I know that they have the same name, and they have the all those things, but it was
Sorry.
that cat is determined to rest on your neck.
She can rest on me. I just don't want her on my chair. There we go. Now she's good.
But so I always had a very clear distinction there, and I I would openly make fun of Star Trek. But the thing was, I really hadn't given it a chance, and so actually Jesse from Crusher Convo was one of the people that when I had talked to. They're like, well, maybe you should try animated Trek because I really love Star Wars animation. I like Star Wars Clone Wars and Star Wars Rebels. To me,
I really liked Star Wars: The Clone Wars. My son was really into it, and I started watching it with him just to hang out with him, and it was great.
Yeah, great storytelling and everything else she said. And so it was suggested to me to watch Prodigy and Lower Decks. So I watched those, enjoyed those. And then I went into Strange New Worlds. I watched that. I loved that. So I decided to go back and rewatch the original series. And so for me, now I didn't make it all the way through the original series. I still have my own issues with Captain Kirk, but I like the rest of the I love it. It's like, oh, how dare you?
Well, because I love Captain Kirk. Even in this
I
era
get
when it's like you're not supposed to love Captain Kirk, I love me some Captain Kirk.
Well, I think the thing is, and I for those who are like, oh, you can't love Cap. Here's the thing: it was this. I give much of the Star Trek from the original series a pass because it was written in a very different era with a very different mindset. And even at that, for its time, it was still extremely progressive. And
yeah,
there was a lot of episodes, and this is what got me interested into watching the rest of Star Trek. Was that as I was watching the original series, I would have to shut off episodes after I was done watching them because my mind was racing and thinking about what I had just watched and how it affected humanity now, because the things that they were talking about in the 60s were still prevalent in the 2020s.
Mm-hmm.
Here we are 60 years later, and we're still talking about some of these very same basic principles and issues and all these things. And so for me, it was a very interesting juxtaposition of my own fandom and how I saw things, and made me kind of take a rebalance of things and going, well, maybe this Trek thing really isn't that bad, and maybe I should watch a little bit more of it.
Did you find your way into 90s Trek?
I'm actually in the Next Generation right now.
Cool.
So yeah, and I'm very much enjoying that. Yeah, it's kind of funny because some of the everybody told me when I started watching Next Generation, be careful, or not be careful, but just get past season 1, you'll be okay. And I was like, I don't know, I think this is pretty good. I kind of like it. There was a couple episodes where I was like, well, that was a little wonky, but
there are some clunkers and they're still working stuff out, but there's some good stuff in season 1 for sure.
Oh yeah. I'm in season 3 right now, so I'm
nice.
I'm making decent progression. I'm at a point where I've watched a bit of DS9, I've watched a bit of Voyager. Nothing where I would say that I've watched enough of it to really know the characters. But like before we had Armin Shimmerman come on, I sat down and I watched some DS9 so I could get an understanding of who Quark was, and not just, hey, this is Armin Shimmerman. He plays that quirky Quark guy, but I wanted to have an understanding of the character and understanding what he was doing and things along those lines. I try to make sure that when I have somebody on the show, I have a decent understanding of their breadth of work, so that there's,
of course,
but yeah, so it was kind of interesting for me to be able to watch that and see that even through all these different modes of Trek, that the same basic principles were there, and I really liked that. And I do love that it's the opportunity. Boy, that cat is purring loud. I love
I know,
that.
I'm sorry. Do you want me to move her?
No,
She's
no, 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 no. It's
okay.
beautiful.
I just
I
realized she's really loud. And the
no,
other
she's
one's louder. His purring is insanely
just
loud.
means your kitty's happy. That's all it
Yeah.
means. That's
Which
I'm okay with that. That's
she's
good.
looking at me with her closed eyes, which is,
Oh, love it.
kitty love.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So enough about me though, in my journey through Trek. Let's go back to your Trekness. Now, out of all the shows, so I'm going to guess that original series is your favorite show.
I don't know if I have a favorite because it actually depends on what I'm in the mood for.
Okay,
So, like, I'm not a big ranker. Like, I don't like to say this one is the best and then this one. Like, I'm better at saying, oh, these are near the top and this is near the bottom.
sure.
So, because original series is one of those shows I watched 1,000 times. It was before VCRs and before
Hmm.
I would, this is going to make me sound 150 years old, but I would get TV Guide, if you're
Yeah,
familiar
I
with
remember
a
that.
magazine that
Oh,
used to exist.
I'm very
I would
familiar with that.
comb through and circle all the time Star Trek was on, and I would watch it. And it was the same damn episodes over and over and over.
Oh,
So a
sure.
lot of them are very much imprinted in my brain.
Oh,
But
for sure. Yeah.
Next Gen I loved, and then Deep Space Nine I loved, and then Voyager I loved. Enterprise I didn't love. Sorry, John Billingsley. He knows. Um
He's aware that it's not entirely a fan favorite.
Right, yes. And then Discovery came along and I got to work on the after show for the first year
Cool.
on After Trek. So that was great. So now I have a soft spot for Discovery forever. And then Prodigy I love so much.
It's fantastic.
So Picard had its season 3 was great, parts of season 1 were really good. Season 2 is, I think, the worst season of Trek that's ever existed.
I've actually heard that from somebody else. So
yeah,
I have not
there are a
watched
lot of
Picard
us.
yet, but I've heard that one's really good, three's really good. And if they were to ever to make a season 4, that they wouldn't expect it to be very good because clearly only the odd seasons are good in Picard.
Yeah. Season 1 had some good things and so, there was so much going on behind the scenes that made it all mishmashy.
Right.
So there were problems there.
Yeah.
I enjoy Lower Decks is great. Strange
I
New
love the
Worlds
humor.
is complicated for me. I think the actors are great, the production's great. The writing is the actual dialogue and stuff I enjoy, but I feel like they're relying way too much on original series callbacks. And I think that they don't think things all the way through sometimes or think about why do they want to tell this story? Not just because they like the idea of the scenes, but why do they want to tell the story? And they don't always get it. And yet I I can enjoy it. It just frustrates
Sure.
me sometimes.
I get
But
that.
I've loved so much Trek, and they have different points of extreme personal meaning for me, just depending on the day, the mood,
Hmm.
whatever's going on. But it's a good comfort show and good
I
thought-provoking show and all of that.
Yeah, I'd agree with all of that. I think for me that one of the things I think I liked about Strange New Worlds is that it felt like a modern old show to me. And the best way I can
Yeah.
explain what I'm trying to say is that I thought that it gave a very respectful nod to the original series and the characters that they were bringing in and how they were working with them. Except for I thought the inclusion of Kirk was a little odd. I thought his
Yeah,
inclusion was
so
clunky.
I also think that they cripple themselves by making some of those calls because if they invent their own planets and characters and stories, then they can do whatever they want. But because they insist on using ones that are familiar and they're not concerned about canon, there's no question, they're just not concerned about it. So they
Okay.
just crash right through it. So my way of enjoying it is to just say, okay, it's an alternate universe. It's like the Kelvin verse. It's just a
It's the Calvin
different,
timeline. Yeah,
it's
gotcha.
different. It's a different timeline and things are different. But I also just think like have faith in yourselves to come up with your own stuff and your own characters, and you don't have to rely on that stuff. You can do new things and just try and tell great stories where you have something to say and you want to shine a light on something by approaching it in a creative way that disguises what it is that you're talking about.
Okay. I think that's fair. I think because if they're, um, I think if you're relying on some of those things, I can see how that would cripple it because I think they're trying to, in some ways, like, and I think that was part of the problem with the James T. Kirk inclusion was that the character didn't seem very James T. Kirkish to me.
No. I mean, and you're not even a big James T. Kirk guy, but
Right.
but for me, like I loved him as a kid and saw him as much more nuanced and complicated and interesting than pop culture defines him. You know, like
Hmm.
they just see him as this big swaggering guy who got a lot of women, and that's not accurate to me. So I feel like, yeah, this Kirk isn't my Kirk, I have to say.
Understood. I can get that. I do like Dan Jeanette though as Sam Kirk, mostly because when I see him, I mostly especially with that little pencil mustache he has going on, I think of Sam Rockwell's character in Galaxy Quest every time I see him.
I am one of the few people. I saw Galaxy Quest once and it didn't do anything for me.
Oh, see,
And people are like, "No, it's like Star Trek, you're wrong, and you should love it, and it's so good." So maybe one day I'll give it another go, but it
oh,
never
definitely, yeah, definitely give it another go. Uh, just from the aspect of, um, it's I looked at it as not as a, and I have jokingly said in the past that it was the best Trek ever made. But
lots of
that was
people
also,
say that.
yeah, but it was also
Yeah,
before I became a fan of Trek. So I mean, there's
right.
something to be said there. But I also look at it as cosplay Trek. It's some folks with their cosplay are screen accurate, and they're gonna nail it, right? And then there's some folks who walked in, and God love them, they walk up to their closet and they go, "Yeah, that'll do." And, and to me, some of the stuff that you see in Galaxy Quest is, yeah, that'll do. But there's some great one-liners and some very quotable things from that movie. So
I
if
should
nothing
probably
else,
give it another go at some point.
yeah, if for no other reason, for the comedy alone, and show it and view it as a something showing a respectful nod to Star Trek, it's wonderful for that. All right, so we also mentioned in the introduction that you also have a podcast. You are a podcaster. So
I am.
So tell everybody about your podcast. What is it? What's going on over there? What do y'all
It
talk
is
about?
sure, it is called All Access Star Trek. We just released our 206th episode.
Very cool.
It's me and Anthony Pascal, who's the founder of Trek Movie. So he and I host it together. It comes out every
Okay.
Friday morning.
Excellent.
And we start with the news of whatever's going on in this world of Star Trek news, from projects being made to things we've learned about old things, and sometimes books and comics and other stuff too. And then if we have a new episode to review, we do that. And if not, we'll do an interview or a topic.
Very cool.
So we've been lucky to have some really fun interviews. Good. I like when we get someone for the full hour and can actually have a conversation
Oh,
versus,
for
we
sure.
get a lot of those quick interviews like Paramount Plus will give us, nice of them, but they'll give us like, here's 10 minutes with somebody, and that's great, but that's just a Q&A. And
Yeah,
so when we have someone on the podcast, we can actually have a conversation where we're contributing and saying things instead of just trying to squeeze out as much as we can get.
I understand that. Yeah, because we've had a few of those, 10-minute Q&As, 15-minute Q&As. It's
Yeah.
hard to get to feel like you're having any real interaction because otherwise, you're at that point you're kind of just like slinging questions at them
Right, because
because
you're so conscious of time. And if
for
you have,
sure.
like, if I know I have 10 minutes, I don't want to spend a lot of it on my question.
Right.
I want to give the person as much time as possible. But we've had some great guests come on and just spend a lot of time with us just talking. And it's been amazing. I mean, I remember we're talking to Terry Metalis about Picard. We had to make it into a double episode, I think, because he was with us for so long and it was so great. And whenever we said, "Oh, we're worried about your time. Do you have to go?" He's like, "This is great. Keep going." And
Oh, that's
Aaron Waltke
fantastic.
from Prodigy is the same, like
Yeah.
just so generous with his
He was
time. And
so fun to talk to.
he is the greatest. He's such a good those guys are both just so nice.
Mhm.
And we got Lawrence Luckenbill,
Nice,
from
nice,
Star
nice.
Trek 5, and he was with us for a good long time too. And we've had Frakes came for our 200th episode, which was great. We've had Gates
Fantastic.
on. We've had oh, the cat's back. We've had all kinds of so we've had some really good ones that have been
Excellent.
fun. And you know what? We love talking Trek. We're getting ready. We got to get our year-end podcast planned out and ready next.
Nice. So what do you guys typically do for year-end?
We
Just
try to get a
review
bunch
or
of our we get a bunch of our Trek movie friends. And we do categories like best of, again with the ranking. Best of, best live action, best animated, best moment, best this, best that. But we just try to have some
Sure.
fun with that and talk about the year and also talk about what we're looking forward to next year. I mean, last year there were so many the last few years we've had so many Star Trek shows coming, and now it's very different. It's a very different play space now because there
Fair enough.
aren't so many shows. Yeah. And there are things we just haven't seen, so we don't know. And we fantasize about the day that we get to interview Holly Hunter and Paul Giamatti because they're on the Starfleet Academy show.
Yeah, I think that one's gonna be interesting.
Yeah, I mean, what a cast, man.
Anything with Giamatti, I'm willing to sit down and watch.
And
So
Holly, between the two of them, you
yeah.
can't go wrong. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's a really good cast. And like I said, I've been a big fan of Giamatti's for a long time. And everything I've ever seen him do, he just brings it. And same with Holly Hunter. She just brings
Yep.
it. They're just A+ actors in my book. So I think that that's going to be a lot of it's just going to come down to, see how the writing does. And if it's written well, those two will carry the water. It's not going to be a problem.
And I don't think they would have signed on if it wasn't written well.
Oh, I agree.
And Tawny Newsom's one of the writers, so there you go.
Oh, we'll see. There we go. We're already off to a good start. So that'll be a lot of fun. All right. So Laurie, we've talked about your writing. We mentioned that you were an editor. We didn't really get into that because there's not much to talk about when it comes to editing, other than you missed an apostrophe or a comma somewhere.
Well,
But
that's one way of describing it, but sure. I like to think of it as trying to help the writer say what they want to say.
no, I only say
Accurately.
that. I only say that because I write for a website called Couch Soup, and I joke with my editor that, like, I said, okay, like my last article I turned in was, okay, here's my article, go find the missing commas. But
Well, I
it's a
always
running
joke I
joke between
spend
them.
half my time deleting commas and half my time putting them in. So it usually kind of evens out in the end.
Yeah. Apparently I like my commas and I overuse them.
A
So
lot of people do.
no, editors are very, very, very important. I only mock I joke because I joke because I kid. I joke because I can. But yeah, so we've talked about you being an editor, a writer. We've talked about your podcasting. You got some really cool information about your MTV era days. But I also find that people are never just one thing, and we've already talked about these different hats that you've worn. So what's your hidden talent? What are you able to do that, or do you like to do that you haven't turned into a career?
I feel like the stuff I really like to do, I keep trying to turn into a career, which
Fair.
is interesting. Like the Star Trek stuff, for example, because I'm always trying to build on that and turn it into something.
Sure.
But I think I've taken a lot of things that I like doing, and I've had like I was a TV producer, then a digital executive that I didn't enjoy so much,
Fair.
just because it became more corporate than creative. Um, and yeah, so I think that I think I do the things that I do those are the things I love doing the most. I lament that the things I like doing the most all put me in a chair, sedentary, because I like reading, writing, and watching stuff.
Yeah, I get all of that.
So yeah, so that is my biggest problem. I used to be into baking a lot, and I would bake all the time. Like I would
Well, that would
bake
get you some.
healthy, like muffins and cookies and healthy. I was into healthy baking and making recipes healthier, and then I kind of ran out of steam on that. But I'm gearing up for some Christmas baking. There'll be a
There
lot
you
because
go.
I'm the Jew who loves Christmas.
Fair enough.
So, but mostly yeah, those like my passions are and this cat,
It's a
but
hell of a title, by the way. Love it.
but
Okay.
the I mean the interesting I will say this like first I remember I was working at Fuse and I was on the digital team. And I'll be honest, it wasn't that interesting. Very nice people, but the work wasn't so into. And a
Okay.
couple of friends of mine were like, one of them had gotten a job on a Star Trek show, and one of them had gotten a job on a Star Trek game. And I was feeling very much like, what am I doing here? This is not what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm
Okay.
bored. I don't like this. And I want more. And that's when I reached out to Trek Movie and basically said, do you guys, I'm on your site all the time. Do you guys ever need writers? And they wrote back and said, well, we don't have money, but we have invites and swag and stuff that comes up. And sure. And so, this is like why I think this is an important message for people in general. Like I turned my frustration of things I wasn't doing into how can I do it? And if I
Right.
can't get paid for it right now, I still want to do it because I love it. And because I did that and they responded, not only have I met people who are now some of my nearest and dearest
Mm-hmm.
friends, but I've gotten the opportunity to explore this Star Trek world in a big
Awesome.
way where I get to interview the people who make it. And it's not just the actors, like I get to interview the writers and the
Mm-hmm.
producers and the directors and the people who make it look so beautiful. And I get to I feel like be involved in it in my own way and also let them know how much it's appreciated. And because of that I did end up working on the official after show for Discovery, which was After Trek. And I've been paid to write about Star Trek and things like that. And I feel like I'm trying to, with Trek Talks, I'm taking that love of Star Trek discussions, which I enjoy, and using the power for good, which is to raise money for an organization that feeds hungry people and treats them with dignity. So I think I'm rambling now, but the thing for me is it's
Love it.
taking the things you love and finding ways to do more of it and integrate it into your life. So it isn't this, I wish I could do stuff. Like if you wish you could do something, do it. And if you're not at the point yet, like, yes, I was paid to do After Trek and paid to do some other things, but even when I'm not, I'm doing it because I'm passionate about it and it matters to
Mm-hmm.
me and I love it.
That's
And then I'm
fantastic.
happy. Like it makes me very happy to do all these things. And I think it's an important lesson for my kids. And I think a good one for anybody. Just do the things you love.
Do the things that make you happy.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And that's
Yeah.
honestly, that's why I do what I'm doing right here is I love podcasting. I love talking to people.
Yeah.
I enjoy having these moments when I get to sit down and meet new people and talk to them and find out about them and all these different things. And that's also the reason why I started writing. I don't make money for writing just yet. I'm hoping one day I will. I'm hoping that one day I make money for podcasting. But in the meantime, similar to what you just said, I'm getting to explore these areas. I'm getting to these
Yeah.
different fandoms, and I'm getting to meet these different people that and we were talking about this just the other day. We were on one of our live shows. My co-host Kathleen and I were sitting down and made mention about how we were having a happy hour, and I was drinking a little bit of Irish whiskey, and I was joking that if Graham McTavish could only see me now, he would say that this was heresy because that's what he told me before. And my co-host Kathleen was like, "How crazy is our life that we get to say nonchalantly in a conversation that Graham McTavish said that you drinking that is heresy?" I'm like, "Yeah, um, You know, I used to sell doors and hardware. That wasn't happening in that. Um, but you know, I do this because not because there's a paycheck involved. Would I love for there be a paycheck involved? Absolutely. I would love to get paid for what I do, but I do this because I enjoy it, because it makes me happy. And this is one of the best things that ever came out of the COVID era for me. You know, I
And
started doing this.
I was just gonna say,
Go ahead.
haven't you learned, and I've learned things about myself from podcasting,
Oh, for sure.
right? Like, because I've forced myself to listen back to our podcast every week. And so at first it was a
The word
horrific
whiskers. Oh
it
God.
was it was a horrific experience listening to
Right?
myself, like horrible. Besides that, I hate my voice, which is one issue, but also
Yeah.
you hear yourself doing like, oh, what a stupid thing that was that I said, or how come everything I say sounds like a question? And these weird habits, and then you learn to break yourself of those habits.
Yeah,
You
absolutely.
learn to get comfortable with silence and
Hmm.
with speaking, and it's it's been a really good journey, and I'm someone who doesn't have a lot of confidence. And so not only has it helped me in that way, it's become
Nice.
like, because of the podcast, I've now moderated panels, which I didn't think was something I could do. And I
Excellent.
moderated at Star Trek Las Vegas this year, like on a stage in front of people, and I'm the last person who gets up on stage ever. And I
Right.
and I thought I would be terrified, as I used to be terrified before every interview and everything. And all of a sudden, as I was backstage, I had this moment of like, I am not nervous at all. I know how to talk to people. I know how to do this interview. It was a bunch of people from Discovery, so I was comfortable. It was like
Nice.
Wilson and Anthony,
Hmm. Hmm.
and Ian, because Blue couldn't make it at the last minute. And I hadn't met Ian, but the other two I'd worked with on After Trek, and so I knew them. And I suddenly had this burst of confidence, and I went out there and I had the best time, and I had this adrenaline rush after, like, I was running around and jumping up and down after I was done. And I'd already done a panel for Trek Talks last year, which was a blast. And now I'm not nervous before interviews anymore. Like, it cured me.
That's
So,
awesome.
and I think this is all the podcasting journey. I think it's all
Oh,
because
for
of that.
sure. Well, you know, when I first got started in podcasting, I was doing a show called Focused on Forward, which was a mental health and wellness podcast, because I was struggling with my own mental health, because like I said, I have a daughter with a chronic illness,
Yeah.
and having come out of that situation, and almost a 4-month hospitalization with her, and all these things, you know, I came out of that. My head was a bag of cats, and trying to deal with that and all these other things, and the things that I learned from starting that podcast about myself, and the things that I learned about how to talk to other people, how to interact with other people, the importance of sometimes just shutting up and letting
Yeah,
somebody talk, you know?
that's a lesson.
Oh, it is, right? I had to teach myself that I was not all that interesting, and there's a reason why I had a guest.
Yeah.
You know, let your guest talk. So,
And
but
then
anyway.
it helps in everyday life too, because sometimes, I'm sitting around with my husband or my friends or whatever, and I'm about to say something and I stop myself for a second. I go, what is that contributing? Is that
Mhm.
actually contributing something? Or is that just you needing to show that you're different because your thing is different? And then I stop and I shut up. And then when I do have something contribute, it's something to contribute. It's more valuable. It's more inviting to the other person to get conversation going, versus feeling
Yeah.
like I need to spit out this thing about myself. But I mean, my husband would probably be surprised to know that I actually do hold back.
Right?
So I'd be like, dude, if you only knew the things I didn't say, you'd
Didn't
be
say,
so
exactly.
happy. Yeah.
I tell my wife that all the time. I'm like, "You're only hearing the things that pass the checkpoint."
Yeah.
So
Same exactly.
so,
Unless I'm
all
drunk,
right.
and then I'll just say whatever the hell I'm thinking.
Yeah, exactly. Then the what checkpoint? So,
Yeah.
checkpoints, we don't need no stinking
Yeah, I
checkpoints.
don't need a checkpoint.
All right, Lori, we are at the point where we need to ask you a silly question.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm a
So,
silly
we
person.
started this because, as mentioned before, my aforementioned co-host, Kathleen, was out with her 5-year-old daughter, and somebody asked this question of her, but they didn't ask Kathleen, and we both thought that was kind of rude, and realized that there's obviously comes a point in time in your life where people stop asking you this question, and we don't think that's fair. So,
Okay.
Laurie Ulster, what's your favorite dinosaur?
That's a good question. It might be. Can it be like a specific fictional character dinosaur?
Sure, whatever.
Like, I
We had
think it's.
somebody answer Barney, so I mean, go for it.
Oh, ew, that would not be my answer. I'm
Wasn't
gonna
mine either, but
say Terry from Pee-wee's Playhouse.
I'll
Did you
allow
ever?
it.
You look like you have not watched Pee-wee's Playhouse.
I have watched Pee-wee's Playhouse.
Okay, good.
Oh yeah.
All right, Terry.
I'm 48. I am very familiar with Pee-wee's Playhouse.
Okay, good.
I am very Gen X. I understand all too well.
Love it.
But yeah, okay. I will definitely allow it. And that was honestly, Terry is the first time that he's been used
Okay,
as an answer. So fantastic.
he's
All
my
right, very
favorite
good.
dinosaur.
All right. That tracks. All right, Laurie, thank you so much for being on our show today. Where can our listeners and our viewers go to find out more about you, what you got coming up, and anything else?
So I'm on most socials as Floobish, FLOOBISH, because sometimes you feel a little floobish, you know?
I dig it. I was
So
going
I'm
to ask you about that, so yeah.
Floobish. It's just something my sister said to me. Picked up the phone and she said, Floobish! And that was it. So, like decades ago.
Love it.
Decades have passed. And now I am Floobish. So on all the socials, I'm Floobish. I have a website, laurieulster.com, and I am at Trek Movie. So I write for them regularly. You can find me there all the time. And I'll be at Trek Talks. That's the big one. Is please watch Trek Talks in January.
Yes, please.
And
Indeed.
donate if you can. And if you can't, just share it so that other people who can donate will. The work they do is incredible. And we have so much fun stuff planned that I am so excited about for these panels. If you watched last year, we had a Tuvix panel, which was amazing. We had a Picard Season 3 panel. I got to moderate the Strange New Worlds Lower Decks crossover panel, which I just loved.
That was insane.
That was nuts and fun. So many great things. And we have some really cool stuff that we just had a meeting today talking about. We're doing, I wonder if there's anything I can say. I will say, okay, how about this? We are planning a tribute to Jerry Taylor, who was a who died recently and was one of the co-creators of Star Trek Voyager and worked on Next Generation and had a long career before that too, but we'll focus on her Star Trek stuff.
Very cool. I like that. That'll be nice. Well, we'll make sure to put all those links down below, especially the Trek Talks 4. So there'll be some information in the show notes down below for people to be able to pay attention to. So make sure you guys that you go out and you follow Laurie on all her socials because you will definitely see information about Trek Talks. Follow us as well because we will be sharing Trek Talks information as well. And if you haven't by now, there should be a button coming up on the screen right now to click that like and subscribe, reminding you to do so because that helps us get amazing guests like the amazing Laurie Ulster here to come on and chit chat with us and share their life stories and all that other fun stuff. And if you would like to keep that happening, keep subscribing and clicking like on the videos because that helps us continue to grow. So on behalf of my guest, Laurie Ulster, thank you for coming and watching the FSF podcast, and may the force be with you as you continue to live long and prosper. Goodbye.
Bye.
Copyright 2024 FSF Podcast. Reference to any specific product or entity mentioned on this podcast does not constitute an endorsement or recommendation by FSF Podcast. The views expressed by guests are their own, and their appearance on the program does not imply an endorsement of them or any entity they represent. If you have any questions about this disclaimer, please contact us via email at info@fsfpodcast.com.